This is everything that we need for the clam chowder. For the most part, there's a few things that aren't in here, but this is about all of your prep. To start the clam chowder, the first thing that we are going to do is take your garlic cloves, and here's a trick for getting the skin off garlic. You take the back of the knife, the heaviest part, and you press down until that garlic pops, and you can feel the skin release. Then you can just pull it off like I'm doing here, and it makes it a lot easier to clean garlic. You're not fussing with it. Next, you need to cut off the ends on each side of the garlic, and then you're going to do that same maneuver again to press and crush it down so that it just makes it easier to cut. It's already partially broken up, so mincing it is a lot easier and just more efficient. So go ahead and mince that up just like I did here, and have a little container set aside so that you can combine all of your garlic, onions, and celery in there. So you can use the knife as I did to kind of scoop it up and use it as a spoon. The next thing is to take a quarter of a large onion, and you are going to go around it kind of in a rainbow movement and do slices like I'm doing here. And you can see the way I'm holding my hand, that is the bear claw. Holding your hand like that protects your fingertips, so make sure you do that whenever you are cutting things. Then you're going to go down the center of the onion, as I'm doing here, to make my slices into smaller dices. As you can see, this is how you need to cut your onion. I do go over more ways to cut onions and garlic inside of Cooker Bust, and these little pieces, they're not very big. They don't need to be perfect, but they need to be about the same size. Any little slices that got left behind, just dice them up as I did there. And then you can use your knife again and add that into the same container that you just did the garlic into. So use your knife kind of as a shovel, just be careful of the blade. Now is time for the celery. So it's easier if you cut it into little sections like I'm doing here, and then what you want to do is cut that in half, because this makes it flat and easier for you to cut so that it's not rocking, you're not endangering your fingers, and then you just need to do thin slices like I'm doing here. You're basically making a little baton, like matchstick shape, so that you can dice these up. So once you have them in slices, just get them all together so that you can cut them all evenly. And then just dice up your celery as I'm doing here. Again, using that bear claw to protect your fingers. Scoop up again with the knife and add it to your garlic and onions. Now for the potatoes. So if you don't have a peeler, you can use a knife like I'm doing here. I just prefer to use knives. So go ahead and peel the skin off with a paring knife. And once you've done that with all of your potatoes, you are going to cut them in half, as I'm doing here, and you're going to slice each half at a time. And these need to be somewhat thick. These need to be kind of a medium to large dice, because you don't want the potatoes to be cut too small unless they're going to cook too fast in the soup. You want to give them a little bit of time to cook and give your soup some time to meld with all the flavors. So then just cut it down the middle once and cut these big chunks like I'm doing here. So a lot bigger than the onions and garlic. So medium to large dice. It's all right if they're not even, just make sure that they're about the same size. And then the bacon, highly suggest that you put it in the freezer for maybe 10 to 15 minutes before you cut it, and then cut it in little portion sections like I did, and then again making these baton shapes so that we're going to get a small dice on this bacon. It's a lot easier to cut if it's frozen for a little bit first. So go ahead and dice up the bacon as I'm doing here, and you can put this straight into your pot. So that's like a small dice as well. If there's a piece of fat like that, leave it. We want that in the soup. So don't discard that fat of the bacon. Next, we're putting it in the pot. We're going to have it on kind of a high heat, and you are going to be rendering the bacon as I'm doing here. You need to watch it. You don't want it to burn. Move it around here and there. You don't have to move it every minute, every second. Just make sure it's not burning. And then all of that brown you can see collecting on the bottom, that's all flavor building. That's what we want. So now the bacon, once it gets to this point where it's crispy little bacon bits, and you have all the fat in the pot, and all of it's pretty crisp, and there's no chunks of fat, you're going to add in your garlic, onions, and celery. Mix that around a little bit. All of that brown that was collecting on the bottom of the pan, the moisture from the vegetables will deglaze that, and it will take all of that flavor and incorporate it into the soup. This is what you're looking for. It needs to be translucent. The vegetables need to be translucent. Once they're at that stage, add in your potatoes. Mix those around a little bit, then add in all of your liquids. So your chicken broth, your clam juice, the cans of clam juice as well. So bottles plus the juice from the canned clams. So go ahead and strain that out, and you are going to put your clams aside. So we're not putting them in the soup yet. Make sure you get the rest of that out of the can. Don't waste that. And go ahead and give them a little bit of shake. Get the excess clam juice out of there and add the juice from the canned clams as well. Now you can add all of your dairy in. Make sure you add your bay leaves in at this point too. Also add in the salt and Old Bay spice at this point, and then turn it up to simmer on medium. So get that out of the can and set your clams aside. Cook the soup on a medium simmer until the potatoes are tender. While it's cooking, you need to cut and clean your shrimp. You are going to take the tails off the shrimp, just grab the base of it and pull, and cut them into large chunks as I'm doing here. Once you do that with all of the shrimp, you can just set them aside and we will put them into the soup later. Now, this is the most important part. Once the soup has gotten to the point where the potatoes are tender, it's time to make the roux. So you need to take the butter and melt it and then add in the flour as I did here. I go into much more detail about roux and how to make them, why to make them, what they're used for, and everything inside of Cook or Bust. So once the flour has been mixed in, it's going to start to look kind of like sand. You just need to let it cook on like a medium heat, and it's going to start cooking the flour out. It's going to start looking looser, kind of like this, and you'll see it as it sticks a little bit. You need to pay attention to this. You need to watch it because it can burn easily, and it will cook very fast. This is a matter of maybe 5 minutes. So as you can see, it's gotten looser. Once it gets to the point where it's light brown and smells nutty, you are going to take some of it and whisk it into the soup. It's very important that you whisk it in immediately. You don't want to put a chunk of it in there and then not mix it. The roux can clump up, and the most important thing is that you are adding a little bit at a time and mixing it in as you are adding it. Don't just put it in and not mix it at the same time. So normally I'd have a spoon and a whisk and be doing it at the same time. And then once all of that roux has been added in, you are going to add your raw shrimp and your canned clams. Now, with a roux, you have to boil it because that flour has to cook out, and it has to boil unless it won't thicken, and it'll taste kind of floury and kind of gummy. So you need to let it boil. You don't have to have it on a super high boil, and don't cover this. Covering dairy is not a good idea. I go into more detail about that inside of Cook or Bust. Now that this has boiled for about 20 minutes, you're going to finish it with lemon juice. The reason we finish it with lemon juice is because it's acidic and it can react with dairy and curdle it. So we always add acid at the end to help balance and not curdle. So that is how the soup should look. It's pretty thick, and it will start to thicken as it cools down as well. You can add more lemon juice if you'd like. Do it to your taste. And then add fresh parsley in to finish this soup. Go ahead and whisk all of that up. You can turn down the heat at this point. And proper storage, you just want to cool this down as fast as possible. And this is a nice little bowl of soup that I made with some oyster crackers. Get the full course of Cook or Bust, and I can't wait to see you on the inside and connect with you as one of my students.